BigID is the leading data security posture management, or DSPM vendor, and they do DSPM differently. DSPM centers around risk management and how organizations need to assess, understand, identify, and remediate data security risks across their data. BigID seamlessly integrates with your existing tech stack and helps you uncover dark data, identify and reduce risk, take action through remediation, and scale your data security strategy. BigID is reshaping the future of data security, and CB Insights named BigID the leader in DSPM and the most disruptive cybersecurity software in the space. Visit securityweekly.com/BigID to learn more. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW394 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for any of the links to the articles we're covering, or for any of my snarky comments on any of those links, which also live there. Eamon, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Caffeinated. Yeah, I got my coffee. There's a little earthquake not too long ago, so yeah, doing well.
Yeah, it's no natural disasters over here today. We do get earthquakes in East Tennessee.
Really? Oh,
yep. Not big ones, like 5 point something, I think is the biggest we've had here. But yeah, there is some tectonic activity over here. All right, jumping into it. I don't really have anything to say about Tynes. I know a lot of people who love it and are using it to automate crazy stuff too, like onboarding, offboarding stuff, like all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't even think of as like a security use case. But Tynes makes it really easy to automate stuff, so people are just automating lots of stuff. So I love to see it. Love to see them raising the funding. One of those few products that I think they just spent a lot of time on to polish, and people appreciate it. They've got communities who share stuff that they've built. Like I'm in a Slack, and the only product-centric channel in that Slack, which is full of security leaders, is a Tynes channel, right? Like that's they've got a fan club essentially. So always good to see that. You've built a good product when you have a fan club that just organizes itself.
I also know some people who work there and they have happy employees, which is also a really good sign.
Not coincidence. I'm thinking that's not coincidence. Like somebody needs to capture like how you build a company like that,
Yeah. I used to work with Ian, so we were in the same security group. So I love the product, and I love anything that automation and no code. So he was one of the early no code automation revolution, right? Way early before it became a thing like now.
Yep. All right, we've got a bunch of acquisitions here. Not sure I have a lot to say about maybe a couple of these, but I'll just rattle through them real quick. We've got CyberArk acquired Zilla Security to reshape identity governance. It's the PR tagline, and administration for the modern enterprise. We've got Drata
What
picked
shape
up
do you think they're
SafeBase.
going to make it? Is it going to be like,
What's that?
What shape are they going to make it? Like when they reshape it, is it going to be like,
oh yeah,
hexagonal, like
cube?
I always think that's such a bizarre. We're going to reshape it. Like, anyway, sorry. I digress.
Zilla is very clay-like. It's very moldable. Drata acquired SafeBase, which is kind of a cool product, right? Like if you've encountered SafeBase, it basically makes it easier to share. In some cases, real time. Most cases, it's just like a security dashboard for your website, right? Helps kind of show that you care about security. You're being transparent about some of what you're doing with security. It's kind of like if you could share the executive summary of your SOC 2, right? It's like how I would describe SafeBase. And Drata didn't have one of those. A lot of the other big ones out there do have something SafeBase like. So I mean, to me, it always seemed like something that was built to be acquired at some point, by some GRC company, some, help us help you get to your SOC 2 more quickly type company, compliance automation. Just
Yeah, I've been working with Savebase from the early days, and
Mhm.
I loved their product for the number one reason. One, they had a free tier, which is great for small companies that
Yeah.
such as, so it got you off the ground. They had policies, a lot of stuff like right out of the bat that helped you build the trust center, and it was really useful for startups. They never wanted to get into like the SOC 2 automation, like tie into it. So there was that limitation. You still needed another product to do
Yeah.
that. So it's interesting, but what they did it really well, really well. So
Mhm.
kudos to them and the whole team.
And then Attack IQ acquired Deep Surface, which I'm not familiar with Deep Surface, but this does look like a bigger trend that I've been seeing, where the old breach and attack simulation companies, BAS companies, are all pivoting and kind of reinventing themselves as either CTEM or AEV is a new acronym, Adversarial Exposure Validation, which just sounds like BAS repackaged, or pen test automation, something. They're checking your vulnerabilities to see if they can really be exploited, right? Like, I think that's what that means. But yeah, I think it makes sense. Like, we need something that can validate that our controls work, right? Regardless of what the acronym is. And we've got a lot of internal stuff that finds configuration issues. We've got all the posture management products, and then we've got products that show us issues from the outside in. And at some point, those two things have to meet. And I'm not seeing it happen just yet. But I feel like there's a lot of value in Psycognito plus Wiz saying, not only is this exposed to the public internet, here's the name of the asset, here's the load balancers and the web server behind it, and like saving you all that trouble of having to go track it down. Here's who the asset owner is. Like, I don't know if that's an Exonius or a Jupiter One that does that, but somebody's got to connect the outside exposure attack surface stuff to the inside, like vulnerability and configuration issue management stuff.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that last week as well, that there's still kind of a gap there between, because it's also usually different teams, different responsibilities, different chains
Mhm.
of command too, right? So who's going to pay for that tool?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. Whoever pays for the sim, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of these tools that have both value to IT and security, right?
Yeah.
Because it tells you where things are. It's
Mhm.
the it creates a map for you.
Yeah. It can be a good
Maybe
thing and a bad thing. If IT and security are good at sharing budget, it can be a good thing. If IT and
Mhm.
security are jockeying for budget, probably not a great thing.
And for most of what I hear, it's the latter. Like, I hear more stories about the latter than the former. Why do you get so much budget?
Yeah. That's why I tried to explain to people why you couldn't use the term observability and security. I'm like, if I'm a CISO and you say observability, I'm like, I don't want the CTO or CIO anywhere near my budget. No, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we just clearly, like, we're changing acronyms here. Now it's adversarial exposure validation. In security, we're very agile when it comes to words for things and acronyms for things. We can
I
pivot
mean,
on a dime.
analysts need to pay their bills, right? And I say that as an analyst, and research analysts pay their bills by creating acronyms and product categories. So that's just how it works.
Buzzword
It's true.
bingo. Buzzword bingo.
the SEO gets maxed out on stuff after a while, so you have to create a new term so that you can re-up your SEO.
Yeah. Do you want to fight with IBM on SEO or create a new term? Yeah, your
Exactly.
choice, right?
That's how we ended up with ANAP.
I often need a nap, but no time for it today. Today's podcast day. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday, I get a nap. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Next one here, SolarWinds got acquired by, I assume, a PE shop who's going to like cost cut and stuff, which makes people nervous because already, SolarWinds has been having a lot of problems. So like, you delete half of the security budget. What happens then? So yeah, that's. I mean, there's not a whole lot that I have to say on this one, but yeah. The headline here is the SolarWinds $4.4 billion acquisition gives CISOs what they least want: uncertainty.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I know that a lot of CISOs chose to continue to use SolarWinds post the whole kerfluffle. But this shouldn't be a surprise to them, though, right? Like, you wouldn't imagine that something like that would happen. People would be personally prosecuted, and then things will just go back to normal, and nobody's going to try to chop shop the company and return some investment. So I would assume that if you don't like change and that's why you stuck with SolarWinds, you knew that you were delaying the inevitable.
And then the last one here, this is, I didn't know any of this backstory, but Jyoti Bansal, who sold AppDynamics to Cisco for $3.7 billion, has been running two startups at the same time. Harness, I'm not familiar with, but Traceable is an API security company. And I believe that's where Tyler Shields was working before he went back to the analyst gig, working at ESG. So, yeah, we don't see that often. First of all, we don't see a founder running two companies at the same time often. I don't know if he's been running them at the same time. He's had different roles in each, I think, but he's been CISO at both at some point in time. But yeah, merging them both together, the resulting company is worth about $5 billion and expects about $250 million in revenue this year. But I guess, like, if you've got a foot in both companies and they're complementary, like, sure, you can find an investor that's going to help you merge them together or something, which I assume is what happened here.
That's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating story.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like running two giant independent departments and then merging them, I guess. So
yeah, it says he's been running two startups as co-founder and CEO. So he's been CEO of both since 2020.
Wow. Fascinating.
That seems like a lot.
It'd be an interesting case study versus trying to start a company that does two things well. I think to a certain extent, operating them in silos helps them kind of hyper focus on what they need to do, and then there is no trade-off of resources between two different objectives. If it had started as one company and stayed that way, there's always a trade-off between two different groups with two different objectives. So it's interesting to think about this more and, kind of A/B testing and then combining to see if you get there.
There's some great quotes in here. So Steve Herrick, who joined Institutional Venture Partners in 2001 and sits on the boards of Harness and Traceable, says, "I've never done this before, backed a CEO to run two companies simultaneously, but Jyoti is that good. Blah, 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 great executive, blah, 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 says nice things." And he said, I said, "This is a major risk." I got his assurance he wouldn't do a third one. I thought that tickled me. All right. It's I hadn't realized that they were going to be that big combined. 250 million in revenue. I mean, half of that is a lot for a startup. I didn't realize Harness and Traceable were that big. But that's it for the financial stuff here. I think, unless you count 7 AI coming out of stealth. So this is one that I'd heard a few things about. I think there's some big names at 7 AI. They're talking up agentic security. It's going to be interesting. We were just talking about 2025 being the year of kind of make it or break it for Gen AI based security companies. Like, show me the goods or get ready to pivot. And they're just coming out of stealth with the latest AI buzzword, which is agentic. Which everything we've been talking about AI and non-deterministic output, like, okay, now you're going to multiply that and you're going to have these things autonomously talking to each other, and it's going to be inconsistent and unreliable. I'm sure that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the exact AQL thing we were talking about previously, with our interview, is that if I think people think that if you just keep layering on layers of things that are 85% accurate, it'll be okay. Where the reality is, when the 15% occurs in a different blind spot and all of those different things, you end up with this kind of Swiss cheese of AI that, is just as good as letting untrained fresh out of college kids run your critical systems. Like, some of them will be really good at it because they'll have used their time in college really well and be really well trained, and others are going to be kind of skewing towards the middle of the bell curve and do enough that most people would think that it's okay. But this is the thing that I think, like, because of the standard, just the distribution of, say, skill and intelligence in humans, like, we're saying, okay, we have AI that covers the middle 50% and is starting to inch towards the right, but the diminishing rate of return as you get to smarter and smarter people gets more and more difficult for AI to make up for, right? So, like, sure, if you're running a SOC with a bunch of people who are barely, who are very loosely trained, who have that kind of middle of the bell curve talent, put a bunch of AI tools in there. It's probably not going to screw up more than they are right now. But if you're a large billion-dollar bank running a SOC, you're not going to be hiring the middle of the bell curve. And the chances of finding AI that's going to mimic those 10x engineers is pretty low, right? So I don't know. I just think that we think that because we're better than average people, we're getting in the right direction. But I don't know that people really understand the kind of standard deviation nature of intelligence and how far AI has to go to be at the level of your elite kind of SOC analysts.
So I think of two things when I hear agentic. One of them are different AI tasks, that are kind of chained together in some kind of workflow, where it is very important, like the output of one is the input of the other. And that's where I think things can really go off the rails in that kind of situation, unless there's some really good guardrails around it. And then the other thing that I've seen people referring to agentic with is just the same task that's repeated. So just a single task. Give me a summary of my vulnerability intelligence for today every morning as you drink your coffee. So that a prompt plus a cron job. Which okay, if that's what this is, if this is just a whole bunch of summaries and insights, and you're going to have all these agents just summarizing and giving you insights of things where there's like too much information to consume that stuff. Like, that's kind of what, what's his name? What's the other, what's the newsletter king in the security space? Eamon.
Daniel Miesler?
Not
Or
Krebs.
Yeah, Daniel Miesler. So that tool that he built, that fabric tool, is kind of like this, right? Like he wants it to go out and read all the newsletters and watch all the black hat talks and like just take all this information that he'll never have time to consume and tell him the most interesting bits of all of it. Because a lot of times you go to a talk and there's 5 minutes of interesting stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or the it's a big lead up to, a single statement or idea or something like that. So if that's what they're talking about doing here, okay, sure, totally doable, and yeah, maybe there's value in that, and that can save you a lot of time and labor. But the kind of building this chain of agents with different skill sets doing different tasks, that's where I get a little bit nervous.
Well, I mean,
It's
assumedly, these are all going to be the whole proposed value of AI agents is that they can each be more specifically trained to do their, specialized task. And somebody still needs to oversee that. And then again, like technology is constantly changing and evolving. Those need to be retrained every so often. And so now you're just going to end up with the same issue you have with patching with all your out of date cert. It's just another layer of crap that needs to be maintained, and nobody's
more
set up the
overhead.
infrastructure to do that. And maintaining training models is a lot more expensive than paying somebody to patch servers. So then you're talking about, an active economic disincentive to keep them up to date. Yeah, to your point, it's just going to be another layer of people to manage and have to upskill essentially.
You make a good point there. I often point out products can have negative value, right?
Yeah.
And you can very quickly end up in a position where, like the PCI story I told with Ali. Literally we would have had to add 20 extra hours to every engagement and charge the client for that to use that tool versus not using it, just using Excel.
Yeah, well, because like if you have an agent, for example, like sitting between your cloud org and your, parsing logs, and you add an additional log source, one of two things is going to happen. Either the agent's going to know how to parse it, or three things. It's going to know how to parse it, it's going to screw it up, or you're going to have to retrain that agent. And thus far, there's not really a great way to remove stuff from a trained model or to add it without retraining it. So that's really expensive. Like, it's very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Eamon. I cut you off earlier. Sorry.
Oh no, no. I think we're still early. I mean, a lot of people say we're ready for it, but if you've actually tried to use an AI in your workflow, I mean, let's take Fabric for example, right? You still have to have the patterns. Someone has to write the patterns and figure out. I mean, like I'm looking at some of the patterns now, and I wrote a couple patterns internally, but like um, one pattern is you're a super intelligent AI system that extracts the most controversial statements out of inputs. So who's to define what's controversial, right? Like, I guess the definitions of it's still evolving. So take AI in a security context. Yes, there's a natural pattern for, say, bad behavior, but think about it when, when the adversary knows how this AI is going to think and you're relying on this, then it's easy to subvert it, right? There's just, I don't know. People will think it's like it's going to be a super like a swap, but you're going to still need people's just jobs are going to change to more prompt engineering to get their tools like Tines and all these other tools to do the things they want them to do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like it's one of those like how out of the box would a SaaS tool figure out how important VPC logs are to you, to your specific organization, without
Right.
talking to people, without there's so much of that discovery that's not objective information. A lot of it's subjective. A lot of it is like that tribal knowledge that AI just
It's not
doesn't have
written down
access
anywhere.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where VPC logs for most companies are probably some of their lower risk logs, for other companies they're not. And so there's nothing that works like that out of the box. And we just talked about this in our last interview segment with Ali and in the previous one about how all of the kind of out of the box stuff, like all these vendors want to sell you just an analytics tool. They're not honest about the professional service hours you're going to need to get it deployed. They're not honest about the cost of standing it up, the cost of it failing if it doesn't. And I mean, I wouldn't be either if I was selling SaaS, but a lot of that kind of to think that you're going to be able to automate any of that, I think is a little bit willfully ignorant.
Yeah, I call it the cost of customizing. Like the bit that happens between when you buy the tool and you get it up and running and it's useful to you. And like you were saying, Jackie, earlier, a lot of these companies have to eat a bunch of professional services to get the customer there, because on their own they would give up, it'd become shelfware, or they wouldn't buy it, and the proof of concept wouldn't go well, or you end up getting 100% churn because it's just too much work and they don't have the labor for it. All right. So we've got a few things here. It's not a whole lot to talk about. This looked like an interesting tool called Cazadora, simple hunting script for hunting suspicious Microsoft 365 OAuth apps. I think it's SSPM, SaaS security vendors will sometimes pull some of this stuff out and bring it to your attention. But if you don't use something like that, this can be a great way to see if there's something suspicious sucking all the proprietary data out of your Microsoft 365. And then number 5 is, I just in general, every time the DFIR report releases a new report, it's just chock full of all kinds of lessons learned and attacker TTPs that you can read about and you can learn from, you can build detections around. So I just love to, it's just so chock full of useful information. I tend to throw this in the show notes every time they come out with a new one because it's usually just every couple of months. It's not super common. And then the next one, Jackie, you said you were talking about this earlier today. Thomson Reuters wins AI copyright fair use ruling against a one-time competitor.
Yeah, so I was having this conversation with a customer because they were referring to a law firm basically locking down Gen AI and prohibiting attorneys from being able to use it, and was just kind of talking to the customer about this. And so my understanding is that what happened here is that is this the one with the legal content? There are two different rulings that came out this week. Is this the one with the Westlaw? Yeah,
Yeah,
Westlaw. So
legal research
essentially,
firm Ross Intelligence. Yeah.
yeah. So Ross Intelligence used Westlaw, which, if you're not an attorney, is kind of this whole database that's related to legal crap, and scraped Westlaw. So this is a really interesting ruling. I think it's good. We're going to see a ton more of these, and that if you can actually attribute training data, you do have some legal case for suing companies. And the issue, though, is that a lot of these things, because this is a legal database, I think it's a little bit easier to prove.
A
But
little
with
bit
the
more
super large
slam
language
dunk.
models, yeah, how are you going to trace an output back to an input? But this also kind of relates to my squirrel story for this week. But yeah, I think having worked in music before, and knowing how broken music rights are and how much artists struggle to get fairly compensated, I hope we see more of these. I hope we see more. And this is the terrible thing, is that one of the best uses for AI is actually original attribution for content. So, to be able to take a piece of content and say, no, that actually existed on the internet before. Here's the original. Here's who should get paid for that content. I would love to see that. So this is one of those few cases where I'm like, yay, more litigation.
Yeah, and I mean the impact of this, could be pretty big, right? We've seen cases, kind of David and Goliath. The case where Apple had to kill some of the functionality of the Apple Watch, the blood oxygen reading, because it infringed on a patent of another company. Could we possibly see OpenAI have to pull some models, because they trained on data, or the outcome of a suit? They're not allowed to have that data in their training, and it's incredibly expensive to retrain stuff. So, yikes! Like imagine the pain this could cause some of these the foundation model. The companies creating these foundation models.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, just to be super clear, so this is Westlaw's editorial content. So this isn't like this company, Ross Intelligence. So Ross Intelligence is like a legal research firm. They didn't go out and scrape laws, right? So laws are open to the public. What they scraped was Westlaw has attorneys who interpret legislation and rulings and things like that. And so this tool was using like humans' intellectual capital. So you absolutely can scrape publicly available knowledge, but in this circumstance, you need a subscription to Westlaw to read the editorial content. So it was a violation of the terms of service and the copyright.
Yeah. All right. Also, while we're on AI, we got a few other things here. The number 7 AI Copilot code quality 2024 data shows 4 times more code cloning. This is an interesting one where really, I think what we're talking about here, the reason I included this is there's just concern about what's happening to code, and uh, I'm not sure if it's an apples and oranges comparison, but developers have always been copying other people's code, their own code from other things. Uh, Putting together code has always been kind of this slapdash process where any chance you get, you can avoid rewriting something. In fact, most of the bugs I've found in code working for companies has been because people do a bad job of copy paste and then find and replace.
Mm.
And I have to go in there and I've fixed a lot of code like that. But but yeah, this is yeah, just a quote here. Alarmingly, there's been a massive increase in copy pasted code and a precipitous decrease in moved or refactored code. This is across 211 million lines of open source software, including some major projects such as VS Code. And the concern is that as we AI enable programmers with tab completed code suggestions, we're going to see reams of code generated by AI instead of well maintained code bases. Um, yeah, eventually AI tools might help us reverse this trend, but not yet. So this is from Mike Mason, who's the chief AI officer at ThoughtWorks.
I mean, can the AI just add comments to the code? I mean, I'll take
Yeah,
like
it can.
I'll take a little bad code with just if they could just put better comments. But no, in all seriousness, though, one of the things they'll also be copying too is bad security patterns, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're training AI. Say it's like being trained on, say, bcrypt for password encryption. I was just talking to someone about this,
Mhm.
but it's not up to date on using the latest algorithm for password encryption, right? So it's just you're just going to rely on this AI, assuming it knows what the latest thing is, right? So that's one downside of using AI. But I hear people are really happy with Cursor. They're just
And
Yeah.
you're in
it,
this catch
some
22 of to get good code that's up to date, you need to limit your if you're doing RAG, assuming you're not just using a standard built model. If you're doing RAG, you want to limit it to things within the last year or two, but that also so severely limits your training data pool that it then becomes a lot easier for a bad actor to pollute that training data, to pull in XZ utils, and bake in. And then the other thing is too, like, it doesn't always tell you when you're this is the whole attribution thing that I think is really the best use for AI is code attribution too, because what I've seen is that if you use, even Cursor and you pull 2/3 of a snippet of open source code, you don't know you've just pulled 2/3 of a snippet of open source code. So if a vulnerability is found in that open source code, you may see the notice, but you don't know that that's what you pulled, and you don't know that's what you've put into your code base. So yeah, I think this, I don't know. I was actually reading a thing yesterday about how generative AI in general is degrading people's cognitive abilities and problem
Mhm.
solving. So I, j- I mm. Yeah,
And
it's
I think that's a real concern here is that at some point, like you're like, what is this supposed to do again? Like,
yeah.
what was I trying to achieve here? Like you're going back through the code, and because you didn't write any of it, you're like, oh, now all of it needs to be refactored. Because it's going to take me so long to figure out what's going on here. Like, I just need to go back to the original goal, scrap all this stuff, and rewrite it from scratch so I actually understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people who've worked at, 40, 50, 100-year-old companies have experienced the being handed down a code base that's gone through 35 different people. This is
Yeah,
that on steroids, right? This is a
yeah,
code base that's gone through 85,000 iterations, and there's nobody to call, at their retirement home to ask them what if the hell they were doing on this COBOL. Like, it's, I think it's a really like obviously as tech evolves, we always introduce new problems, and then some billionaire comes along and charges us a bunch of money to fix them instead of fix the symptoms of the problem instead of the source. So I'm sure we'll just develop a different AI tool on top of this to help fix these problems.
and yeah. So, on a positive note, the last AI item here, OWASP recently dropped a ton of really useful things here. So they've got an AI security solution cheat sheet that you can grab, and we've linked to all this stuff. And they've got a guide for preparing and responding to deepfake events, and a LLM and generative AI security center of excellence guide if you want to build one of those in your organization. And then the AI security solutions landscape is basically like a catalog of vendors out there doing various AI security things. And you can even filter it by which of the generative AI OWASP top 10 that they can help you with, depending on what you're concerned
Hmm.
about. So, I mean, being an ex-analyst, I love anytime somebody creates an open directory of vendors out there. I find that really helpful. So
Yeah.
it
Good
made me
find.
happy.
Yeah.
Great resource there. Next, Eamon, you want to tell us about the dark side of security leadership?
Oh. Well, I figured, I don't know, I was inspired to write an article on really helping communicate what it means to, do security at an organization, or not do security, I guess. So it comes from, I think what I was trying to do here is, um, yeah, just give insight to non-security people on how security is run, and then also kind of spread the accountability butter, I guess. I don't know what, for lack of the accountability-ness across all teams. So on the side of security leaders, right? Are we reporting the right things? Are we talking to the business? We've talked about all these things, but it's a thing, and every company is different. But on the other side, on the non-security side, when they look and see, oh, nothing is being done, or they see, no fires have happened. I think Drew Porter just posted today on, like, people killing red teams, and then asking, why are we not, are we having issues? And his analogy he goes, it's like getting rid of the fire department because you haven't had any fires.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I think in the times of where security budgets are being slashed, CISOs, I talked to a CISO last year that had to take a 50% pay cut, right? But maybe they had done the work already, right? So like, are we connecting? A lot of times when we look at security teams, we just like see a pit full of money, and we're just like dumping money in this. Like, what are we solving? But sometimes to solve the problems, it takes a cohesive approach across different organizations. My
So
little
are
summary.
we? Let me ask you some questions here. Are
Sure.
we not spending enough time um, level setting on expectations when the role is created or the person comes in? Is that part of the problem here?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly one of the things. People bring in security folks and think they'll wave a magic wand, and all these things will go away. But the reality is that we will find things, and we are pretty good at finding things for you, and we will try to fix as much as.
And we'll pester the shit out of you.
Yeah, that's the thing. Are you paying us to pester you? Basically, is that what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Are you
or are
ready
we
to
gonna?
change the culture that's causing the things that you're finding? Because hiring a
Yeah.
CISO doesn't change crappy data management culture.
Exactly. And so the CISO's job is to try to get us to a security culture, but that takes time, right? And it takes everybody to be on board. And it's like, kind of like, okay, come on, guys, let's, like, come with me here. And I back to what your question, Adrian, is expectations, like level setting, like understanding, and also being set up for success, right? So, and then on the security side, speaking up when it's not working out, or you like, if you could try to measure the room and see, hey, is this meeting your expectations? What do you think so far of progress so far? Stuff like that.
Well, if I'm hiring you to be a scapegoat, somebody I can fire when things go wrong, I'm setting myself up for success. I don't
Yeah.
know about you.
Well, I also think so. Like, if you've never cared for an ocelot before, and neither have I, and then I'm going to hire you to be an ocelot caretaker, how, like, I have to just pull these like yardsticks out of my ass to measure you with, because I don't know what makes a good Ocelot caretaker. So I'm going to look for things like numbers. And that's Shamla Naidu with Netscope has a great kind of like a very, very high level. It's like the board. I think it's called the Cyber Savvy Boardroom. And it's just all about, like, she was saying at this dinner I was at with her, that every time she would join a board, because she knew cybersecurity, every other board member would just like tune out anytime something that ran on electricity was discussed. And so I think some of it is that if you don't have a cyber person on your board, or, you know, nobody on your executive team, like, how do they decide how they measure the CISO? How do they decide, you know, in these like these stupid like number of detections, like it's all
Yeah.
stupid crap. It's like measuring to your point, you know, fire department. It's like measuring the gallons that you sprayed at a fire,
Right.
rather than like how effectively you put that fire out and kept it from burning the houses next to it down.
Like they were talking about Anthem, like limiting the amount of, you know, instead of talking about patient outcomes, limiting the amount of anesthesia you can use or something like that. Like that's not how it works. Like I would argue, you know, if you're even looking at breaches, you're looking at the wrong thing in terms
Yeah.
of how to, you know, because it's you know, these days it's, you know, how well are you going to handle that breach? You know, it's not preventing it,
Right.
you know, that you should be
Yeah.
looking at, right?
Yeah. Exactly. How well are you going to handle it? I mean, do you have someone on hand that can handle the breach for you in the right way? Like, just so many things. And back to what you said about the token security hire, I actually have an article called "The Token Security Hire," where
Yeah.
you hire someone just to deal with this. And then, Jackie, back to the fire analogy. Think about this: like, say the fire department spends, I don't know how much, on educating people on fire prevention. Well, like, but then there's no metrics like on actual fire. So, you know, it's the exact same thing. Like, we
Yeah.
are trying to help prevent security issues. At the same time, we can't stop a fire from happening, right? Like, we cannot do that. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes we as security folks feel like we take it personally. We're like, what did I not do in communicating the risk to the organization? You know what I mean? So it's challenging it's challenging.
Well, Eamon, if I'm going to hire you as a token security hire, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you security is so important to us. Like you don't
Yeah.
even know. It's so that's why we're hiring you. And like
We
you
value the
can't have the
privacy and security of all of our customers, and it is our top priority.
Yeah.
and then your whole role there at the company is based on dishonesty. So like I mean,
Right.
how
Well,
do you
like how
identify
many
that as the CISO? How do you avoid that?
Oh, I ask a lot of good questions. I'm like, why do you actually, like, why now? Like, why are
So
you coming now?
there
Go
are
ahead.
red flags then you can look for.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of questions like, hey, why are you coming? What's driving this actually? What's um yeah. You know what's the worst actually? Say you get all the green flags and everything works well, but then there's a change internally. This happened several times where you know, I'm reporting to a security-minded engineering manager, and then a new one will come on and be like, "Oh, we don't need security. I didn't have a security team in my last place. Why do we need you?" Like, okay. So
Yeah.
you can't do anything about that.
And I think a lot of times there's this fantastic book called Likeable Badass that separates power from status. And so power is like the title, the money, like all of that
Me and
stuff.
Eamon are
But
both opening Amazon right now.
yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
it's actually a book for women. Shout out Allison for she's awesome. And it's a book for women, but I think everybody should read it because it differentiates between power and status. And power is all of the you know, the money, the title, all that. Status is your ability to actually affect change. You know,
Mm.
do people respect your opinion when you talk to your executive team? Do they actually listen to you? So, and this is where I think I am continually shocked by how little training employees are given at most major companies with regard to data in general. And there's all this like weird mystification that I almost think like IT and security people keep between them and everybody else in the organization. Like, oh, like software is complicated, data is complicated. But like, if you can understand the difference between the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and the Real Housewives of Orange County, you can probably identify PII versus non-public data versus public data. And like, it's not really that difficult. It's very basic, but no company is willing to spend that money on training. And it's insane because it's such a small amount to spend, a couple days of everybody's time to prevent 80% of the issues in the enterprise, and just companies won't do it. Or they don't do it effectively, I should say. You know, it's a click through. I acknowledge that I say I did this training.
Yeah. It's interesting. Go ahead.
We can't spend 30 grand here, but we can waste $1 million here. Financial logic at a lot of companies, it's mind boggling.
If you still got VP level people putting customer data into their own ChatGPT, like no CISO in the world can fix that problem.
Yeah.
You know, I in the article though, and I think that the reason it's spicy is because I also do try to push some accountability also to the security folks too, right? Because there's two sides. I don't want to be only one-sided here and just say, you know, non-security execs don't know what they're doing. But on the security side, we also need to do the right job. So I have a section called the incorrect amount of political capital, where sometimes you have too much power as in the security org, and you're too just abrasive, and nobody wants to work with you, and then you end up with, you know, people bypassing you and negative security results. But on the other side, I you know, it's tough because we're not in control of a lot of the remediation, and so, you know, when Joe is in charge of remediating the things, and we say, well, has this been fixed? I'm like, well, Joe, has it been fixed? And like, you know, you don't want Joe to look bad, so you got to like do that like delicate balance, you know. So,
well, Jackie, I think you have our squirrel story. I'll let you read us out with that.
Oh, goodness. All right. So I have a really, really fun story. So on Saturday, I came home and I had gotten the little Ring doorbell, and the postman was like, oh, you have a registered piece of mail. I'll just sign for it for you and leave it. So I open it, and it's a summons. For the first time in my life, I'm being sued. And I'm actually being sued by the host of an Airbnb for leaving him a 1-star review. So, as autistic folks with ADHD are wont to do, I spent a whole day going down every Google rabbit hole I could, and I literally have this whole pile of data. But one of the interesting things I think happened is that ChatGPT gave me some horrifically inaccurate legal advice that would have led me down the worst process that I possibly could have done. And when you only have 20 days to respond to a summons, that's kind of important. So that's my fun, but lesson for this dude: if you're running an unlicensed Airbnb, don't sue an autistic person, because I have 10 pounds of paperwork and I'm going to make your life miserable. I also wanted to give a quick shout out. Mr. James Gerard 9330 was really concerned. We had posted a short clip about the environmental impacts of data centers, and he was really concerned because he was worried that my red hair dye was polluting the environment of my scalp. So Mr. James Gerard 9330, I wanted to let you know that it's actually pink. And according to this, it's supposed to be cruelty-free. So next time you have one of those opinions, it would be totally okay to just turn your computer off.
You know, I wonder how many of these are bots now, or, you know, I don't know. That's my only hope.
Oh, no, that's got legitimately mediocre and angry person written all over it.
Yeah. It's
don't
very
worry.
sad.
All of my hair color is very natural and not the chemical kind. So my scalp's just fine. But I do really appreciate your concern. It makes me feel seen.
And for autistic people listening, there was a lot of sarcasm there. That was, you know. Yeah.
I know,
don't
I'm one
welcome
of those
more
weird
comments
people
from
that
you.
has like the crossover, and sometimes it makes it hard.
So on the good side, like I've been saying in the announcements every week, we'd love to hear your comments, and that's still true. We would love to hear your comments, and the fact that we're getting insults means that somebody's listening to the show. So, it's not all bad, right? At least, and that was a clip. We don't know if he's listened to a whole episode or not, but yeah, it's keep the comments coming. But maybe if it's a comment about our hair, you can just like say it to yourself and not press enter, not post it.
I mean, this is
You
a
don't have to
pretty
share those.
decent hair lineup, so I could see watching this and feeling a
right,
little bit insecure about your hair. I understand.
right. The guy was probably bald.
Nothing against bald people, but
Well, no, yeah, something against bald people that are like dumping on other people's hair, sure. But yeah, not all bald
today's
people.
episode of Enterprise
Just the
Security
ones that are
Weekly.
jerks.
Oh,
All right. On that amazing note, thank you so much, Jackie and Eamon, for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week, we'll be talking to Ilyona Cohen about AI regulation and Jen Guile about some new thing called shift left. We'll figure it out. See you then. Bye.